Hello, this is Susan of the North, aka Susan Hintz-Epstein. I like to use the nomination Susan of the North for my psychic reading, but the rest of the time I'm just Susan. I wanted to talk about something today because I woke up with it fresh from dreams, I guess. I watched the debate last night on CNN between Biden and Trump, and one of the things that really concerns me is that this country is moving in the direction of Christian nationalism, which I don't perceive as all that different from Nazism. And I believe that each person has the right to seek God in their own way. I believe there are many pathways to God, but because we have such a strong effort to politicize religion, I thought I need to start talking more about some of the what I believe are truths that I've experienced over my years of studying God and studying religions and tuning into the divine. And I guess you would have to call me a mystic. So let me just begin with the idea that God is something we can't see or touch. Yet when we go out in nature and we stand beneath a tree, when the wind is blowing in the rains and the breeze feels soft upon our face, and we might hear the stream in the background, or we're outside on a windless day and the sun is beating down on us, but always in nature, there is a sense of a presence that is larger than ourselves. And when I was young, and I was still a Christian at that point, I would identify nature with God, as I had been taught that God was. Yet my studies coming out of young adulthood, looking into more than the Christian religion, there are so many pathways to learn about the divine, whether you are a Buddhist and practicing mindfulness, whether you are a Christian practicing the Sacred Heart of Jesus, whether you are a Baha'i who believes in the unity of God, or a Muslim whose practice is devotion, or whether you are a pagan who is attuning to nature and the cycles of the seasons. I'm something of everything that I've studied, because once it became part of my experience, I could not let go of it. It became part of who I am in my practice. But since 2013, I have been reading the runes. I have been opening to the Old Norse pantheon, Odin, the Norns, Hala, Hulda, Hela, by whichever name. These deities are very old, and in order to understand deity outside of the framework I was given as a Christian child, I had to understand God in a new way. What if the word God is simply an abbreviation of the word good? Language changes over millennia. What we think about something isn't necessarily the way someone else thinks about something, but there is a common animating force that gives us all life. And that force seems to me to be breath. There's consciousness. There's a sensorium of a living body that is no longer living once the breath departs it. We have a presence on the planet from our birth to our death. What happens to us after that has been the millennia old question that our ancestors, so far back that we have forgotten them, prehistory, people wondered, what is this thing called death? They put bodies in the earth in fetal positions, like the earth is a mother who gives rise to a new seed. And I'm not the only person who has remembered past lifetimes. So I do believe that we recur, not that we don't spend some time in a heaven or a hell, whatever it is for us. But I wanted to talk about the idea of God today as consciousness. The more conscious we are, the more awake we are. The Bible talks about waking and sleeping. Jesus warns, always be on your guard. Do not fall asleep. This is not the only religion that teaches about waking and sleeping. I think that the human search to want to know God, to want to know the mystery, is to seek consciousness. When we go back far enough to all the establishment of all the pre-religions that we can know, it seems that the first ideas of heaven and hell were a very shamanic idea of an overworld, an underworld, and the middle world, which is Earth, where we dwell in 3D. The ideas then were that hell was a resting place for the souls who were awaiting rebirth, and that heaven could be a place of reward, but I don't think it was ever promised permanency. I think that was something that came in with the Council of Nicaea. I don't know as much about that as I should, but I've read various bits and parts of it, and things were cobbled into the faith that became Christianity today. But what I observe about Christianity today is that it is a faith that takes all onto itself and decries everything else as false. And this is what concerns me so much about Christian nationalism, because the people who seem to follow it are very limited in their worldview. Their way, and their way is the only way. I don't want to speak against people who are true Christians, who truly follow the teachings of Jesus, but I do not see the Jesus of Christian nationalism as being the Jesus of the Gospels. People are too manipulative in trying to coerce you to follow their way and not allowing you the chance or the dignity to know God for yourself and pick up that way if you choose. Going back to a shamanic idea, there's a very old idea called animism, and that relates to the idea that everything has a soul, not just humans. Everything has consciousness. I think we can substitute the words consciousness for energy, for soul, for spirit. They are qualities that are hard to define. But the idea of animism, if you look in the dictionary, is that everything has consciousness. Everything has life force energy. The planet Earth that we stand on, her life force energy is reflected in her biosphere that gives everything, all of organic life. She supplies the air, she supplies the water, she supplies the food that we need to survive in our physical form on this planet. The sun and the moon, too, are part of that picture. The sun calls life forth from the ground in terms of the seeds coming up in the proper season. But none of this could happen without water, and water's cyclical capacity, its transformational capacity to move from fluid to vapor to solid, ice, liquid, air. And that too has its place in us. There is a further idea in Judaism that God created humans in his own image. Now, maybe for centuries, people have imagined God looking like a little white-haired old man in charge of the heavens. But consciousness has three aspects. It has an intelligence, it has emotion, and it has a third force. In a human being, that would be the body. But there is, even on the higher dimensions, there is a physical form, the astral body, that can be said to take that third force. So looking at the law of three, we have an active force, a passive force, and a reconciling force. And you can see this thread throughout science. You can see this thread in the Christian Trinity. You can see this thread in the three goddesses of Brigid, for example, or the Norns, or the Fates. The past, present, and future, an active force, a passive force, and a reconciling force. If we are talking being, if we are talking soul, if we are talking spirit, we see these three forces. If we are talking a human being, we have thought, emotion, and the physical body. I think you can piece this together for yourself. I don't think you need me to spell it out for you any more than that. But the fact that we have these three components within us is part of shamanic training. It's part of psychology. It's just a known thing. So in animism, the world has a soul. In old terms, it's the anima mundi. But the sun, moon, and stars all have a consciousness at a level that people do not understand necessarily until we evolve consciously. As above, so below. I believe that was the first statement of the Emerald Tablet of Alchemy. We have everything in us that is reflected outside of ourselves. We have the sun, moon, and stars inside of us. These planetary beings have a group consciousness also, at the level of all planets, all stars, all galaxies. This is something Gurdjieff talks about in his work. I have studied Gurdjieff. Again, I come back to the statement that these are things we don't understand until we evolve consciously. What most people do is to mistake their beliefs about something for reality. Question everything. We might trust the evidence of our five senses, but quantum physics, which tells us that light can be a wave or a particle, tells us that this body is not a solid thing, that there are gaps within it that light can pass through, spaces that aren't filled. We are something and we are nothing. The Buddha talks about the existent and the non-existent, but it's a some thing and it's a no thing. It's not a space that is devoid of existence. It may be empty, it may be pure potential, but it's not a gap in space that's devoid of all existence. The spirit can know what the five senses cannot. Our consciousness can inform us as we evolve our intuition. So, my understanding goes in this manner. There is not any one religion that is right or wrong. All have something to teach us. The triad, as I have discussed, is a very old idea. Creation in the image of God, the active, passive, and neutralizing forces. So again, regarding religion and politics, just because somebody tells you something doesn't mean it's true. Verify. Verify it for yourself. God is a very old concept. It's recognizing that there's a power greater than ourselves, but there's a power greater than ourselves residing within us. Because whatever this power is, by its power, I have life. I have breath. I have thought. I have emotion. I have a body. So, my idea about God and the hierarchy of God is this, and I'm just speaking from my own self on this, and some of the things I was dreaming about last night. God is consciousness. He's not Jesus. He's not Buddha. He's not Muhammad. God is consciousness. Consciousness that can work through humanity. But God is consciousness. The God of humanity is the human collective, the form of man, from which we all descend. Beyond this exists an omnipresent being of consciousness, of which all things, all beings partake in greater or lesser degree. The understanding of one person is not the same as that of another. We are not all equal, and it has nothing, in my opinion, to do with social status, but upon our thirst for consciousness, our hunger for it, our working towards it. In life, I find many people who work towards it, and their stories humble me. Yet I have also met many people who say, "Why bother? It's too hard." You might know that upon your deathbed, whether you live the kind of life you wanted to or not. What you take with you is not your wealth, but your experience, your memories, the things that you worked to overcome. And to understand man in the image of God, we look at the triad again: active force, passive force, neutralizing force. And to better study the phases of one thing passing into another, this is maybe getting a little more advanced than I wanted this talk to be, but we look at Gurdjieff's Law of Seven, or the Heptaparaparshinach, in which the active force of the first triad the neutralizing force of the first triad becomes the active force of the next triad. And he has this all conveniently diagrammed in the Enneagram. That's another talk for another time. I just wanted to talk about consciousness and God today. So, to break free of the conditioning of religion, we look at the idea that humanity has created gods in its own image. Contrast the triad with what you know of yourself. What do you value? Money, wealth, fame, health, sexual prowess, luck, pursuing your talents? These might be said to be your God, the God that you have created in your own image. So, how is that reflected in the God you have imaged? How does the God you image reward you? I may not be popular for having said that, but it needs to be said. At the same time, I'm not saying that the gods aren't real. I believe in deity. I follow deity. But my belief here, and I don't know if belief is the right word, because I have verified this for myself through my own experience. What my experience informs me is that there is an omnipresent, larger being, which I will call consciousness, that gives life to all things that exist. And that those beings that we call the gods, like the archetypes, like the runes, are either former humans or other beings that have evolved so high in their level of consciousness that we here at the level of 3D humanity do not understand them. But they are here, in my experience, to guide us, to elevate us, to help us to achieve the same level of consciousness that they have attained. And you may work with one deity for a while. I was Christian, brought up. I do not deny Jesus. I was not one of those who turned around in my beliefs or my faith. I simply expanded. What I take away from Jesus is the gentle, healing rabbi who taught people to pray. I don't see many churches. I don't want to criticize here. I just don't see many churches practicing the Christianity that Jesus lived. Yet I meet people within the church that do. So I don't want to denigrate the sainthood of one person because I have seen the hypocrisy of so many more. What it comes down to is the choices that we make for our own life, the choices we make to venerate the holy. Whatever God holds your loyalty. At the moment, I interact most closely with Odin, the Norns, and Frau Hala. And all of these venerable beings continually have something to teach me. And because of what they have given me, I want to serve by teaching the runes. Now, when Odin had his death initiation on the Norse tree of life and pain and worlds, he brought back the runes. The runes of the Elder Futhark are living energies that facilitate my communication with the gods. When I sit down in prayer and I'm holding the depth of my emotion, the depth of my consciousness, awakened before the gods, it's not a one-way street of communication. They often communicate to me very beautifully by sending the rune symbols into my third eye. And sometimes these pass by so quickly. But the message is usually short and succinct and to the point. And it is something that I can write down in my journal and something I can facilitate and practice and live. And by embodying the message that God's give me, by bringing it into my waking consciousness and acting upon it, my life is full, it is enriching, meaningful, purposeful. And at this time in my life, despite my gray hair, I'm starting over again. I'd really love to share these runes with you. So if you have an interest, please join this channel, subscribe to it. If things I've said today about deity, the idea of animism and the gods and consciousness are things that resonate with you, please join the channel. You might also want to subscribe and take a rune class. You can do that. Just go to Rune Classes. It is RUNE classes, CLASSES.com. And you can sign up for the Rune classes, or you can sign up for more information, or you can sign up for my newsletter. There are so many applications. Now, when I first began receiving the runes as symbols and messages in my subconscious, they did not come to me just from heathenism alone. The visions I was getting were of medieval monks in the field, using the runes to bless the crop and the labor for the day and each other. Now, this, I believe, was prior to Christianity's need to conquer all religions and make themselves the head people. But for me, receiving that was a message that, for me, I continue to embody interfaith principles. And that's the only way I can find words to say it. Well, I think I've about wound down on everything I have to say today. And I hope that some people will watch this and resonate with it. My channel is relatively new. My work with the runes in the public is relatively new. And I wish everyone a blessed Rune Day. I am Susan Hintz-Epstein, aka Susan of the North. Love you all.